Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Turnspit dog, or the Venerator cur. This was a dog that was mostly used in England around the 1600s. As you can see in this image, these dogs were used to turn the spit to roast meat. So during this time, especially in England, the most common and acceptable way to consume meat was meat that had been spit roasted, which is meat that is put on a turning spit in front of an open fire and turned very, very slowly for many hours. So it was the Turnspit dog's job to be put in this wheel and run and run and run for hours to turn the spit and cook the meat. The Turnspit dog was originally used in medieval times, so it's not as young as the 16th century. And it was used in medieval times mostly in really large kitchens and castles and things like that. And then as it became more commonplace, pretty much every household would have a turnspit dog. So around the 16th century is more so when the turnspit dog became more commonplace. Here in the picture on the left, at the bottom, the dog that looks like a lion creature is supposed to be the turnspit dog. And you can see on the right there is a wheel right next to the fire, the large raging fire, which has a dog in it, which is turning that big spit of meat. Then this is a picture drawn of Queen Elizabeth's kitchen from 1570. So why were they using this dog? And dogs in general. So first of all, the Turnspit dog was a really small, long, sturdy dog. They were considered incredibly ugly, and no one would ever keep them as house pets outside of the job that they were set to do. So this image depiction on the left of the Turnspit dog is really more of a monstrous looking dog, not the kind of dog that you would want to have as a pet or around your family. So the Turnspit dog was usually considered too ugly to be a pet, but they were also very strong and very sturdy and incredibly easy to train. So on the right here, you'll see a mandrake hunting dog, which was a medieval practice where it was said that if you heard the cry of a mandrake, you would die. And mandrakes were pretty rare, but they were also incredibly renowned for their medicinal properties. So instead of having a human pull the mandrake, which would certainly kill them, they would have a dog do it instead, because the life of the dog was worth a lot less than the people who could be healed with the mandrake. This same kind of thinking was also applied when we were talking about the Turnspit dog. Um, the Turnspit dog was used because they did not really care that much about the dog and its well-being, and in order to train it, they would toss a hot coal into the wheel so that when the dog would be conditioned to understand that when they were in the wheel, if they didn't run, they would get a hot coal thrown at them. So they learned to run. Dogs have been historically used and trained for incredibly dangerous practices, as aforementioned by the mandrake hunting dog. These were not dogs of nobility that were particularly used for these types of dirty jobs, but dogs for commoners. So the work that the Turnspit dogs were actually doing was, of course, running in this wheel, but it's a bit more complicated than that. The Turnspit dog's wheel would have a pulley system attached to it, which would be a large rope or a chain, which would be attached to a wheel on the spit. So as the dog would run, the meat would rotate. Um, they were mostly working with joint cuts of meat at this time, so they were very, very large, and it would take often 4 hours or more for a single cut of meat to be cooked. So the dog would, at the absolute least, be running in the wheel for 4 hours straight. In some places, with most likely the ones with larger kitchens, such as castles, hotels, restaurants, they would have multiple turnspit dogs who would work in shifts, as depicted in the image on the left. This was not very common to have shifts for the turnspit dogs because they just believed that the dogs were strong enough and they would just get the work done. And they also didn't particularly care about the well-being of the dogs. So turnspit dogs were most common in the 1600s everywhere. So it wasn't just castles, hotels, and restaurants that were using turnspit dogs. It was pretty much every farmhouse would have a turnspit dog to work the spit for them. So there were pretty much every house in the entirety of England was at one point likely to be using a turnspit dog. The turnspit dogs did not really get off of work. They didn't really get time off. At the best case scenario, they would be stopped from working on Sundays to go to church with their owners, and it was not for them to work on their relationship with God. It was so that they could warm their owners' feet during the sermons because the churches were drafty and had no heating system. So these dogs were worked pretty harshly, and obviously in very hot conditions for probably around 16 to 18-hour days. So the concept of the dog running in the wheel to turn something was very easily adaptable to other careers and other jobs. The ones that I have placed on the slides here is the butter churn and the water wheel. So the turnspit dogs were very trainable, and they were a very common breed of dog. They were, at first, it was the very specific type of turnspit dog, and then it kind of, the turnspit dog was kind of most long, short, sturdy terrier breeds were looped into this venerator cur type of dog. And that means in Latin, the one who turns the wheel. So they would have the dog run on this treadmill, which would churn the butter, and they would have several dogs run in these large water wheels to raise water from deep wells. They also invented a dog-powered sewing machine, a dog-powered knife grinder, and even a dog-powered bicycle, where the dogs would be running in the front wheel of the bicycle, which would make it move. So, there was no profession among these that I've listed here that was quite as difficult as the job of the turnspit dog, but these were not easy jobs either. This was perceived to be an ethical practice because the other option was to have lowly servant boys turn the spit with their bare hands, which often led to, like, terrible burns, and they couldn't do it for as long. So the dog in the wheel seemed to be a much smarter option. Another reason why they used the turnspit dog was because of René Descartes. Descartes believed that dogs they had no soul, and all they knew was how to do what they were told, or instinctually what they were led to do. They had no intelligence, they had no sense of love, even though he had a dog, but he also was one of the first people to breed turnspit dogs. He had a dog that was the same breed as a turnspit dog, and he would have his dog breed to create more. And the term the curtailed dog comes from the turnspit dog, as they would cut off their tails to not only make it easier for them to run in the wheel, but to have them clearly distinguished from dogs of nobility. In one of Shakespeare's plays, he calls someone a curtailed dog that wouldn't even be fit to run in a wheel, which is a reference to the lowly and very popularly despised turnspit dogs because they were ugly. The Turnspit dog was eventually went extinct after the invention of the clockwork spit roasting jack. This was similar to a lot of the reasons that we have seen working animals slowly being rotated out, is because they're being replaced by technology and machinery, and the Turnspit dog was no different. So I have attached a link here for a podcast called the Kitchen Sisters Podcast, which describes very well and in a lot of detail the situation of the Turnspit dogs. So I've included that just for any additional information. The dog pictured here is actually the only real reference we have to what a Turnspit dog looked like, because this was the only one that was ever taxidermied. Her name is Whiskey, and she was a Turnspit dog. This isn't a very good taxidermy, but it is at least somewhat of an insight into what they may have looked like. Also, I apologize for the drabness of this presentation. 99% of the images of Turnspit dogs are in black and white. Yeah, thank you.